Dinghai Fusheng Records. Chapter 43. Wild Ambition. Chen Xing didn't expect this kind of question. What's our relationship? Chen Xing also didn't know, because each time he talked about exorcist or protector martial god, Xiang Shu never gave any sign of affirmation. Friends, ma? But it wasn't as if they could instantly be called friends just because they got along with each other. Vaguely, Chen Xing could feel that Xiang Shu's heart cared about him, but this kind of lukewarm feeling was very complicated. I don't know him very well, Chen Xing thought about it over and over. On one hand, he didn't want Che Lufeng to think that he and Xiang Shu were close and use him as a bargaining chip. On the other hand, he still didn't understand what was going on in Xiang Shu's mind. In the end, he just added, "You should ask him that." Since the day they first met, they've always maintained this kind of not close not distant relationship. Sometimes, they were just like strangers, while at other times, they gave out this "we're okay-ish with each other" feeling. Che Lufeng scoffed when he heard this, obviously not believing Chen Xing. Chen Xing just said, "No, you really misunderstand. I'm with him just because we're investigating your people's matters, regarding the drought fiends." Saying so, Chen Xing gave a brief summary of the whole process of his acquaintance with Xiang Shu. Some crucial information was appropriately hidden, and of course, he also wouldn't be foolish enough to tell Che Lufeng the details about his intentions to deal with Shihai and this group of drought fiend princes, drought fiend generals, and drought fiend soldiers. Che Lufeng's face finally relaxed somewhat after listening to the story, but in the end, he still had some doubts. However, when Che Lufeng heard that before he died, Xiang Shu's father, Sholo Wen, had taken the same medicine as him before ultimately becoming a being that was neither human nor ghost, his eyes showed traces of fear and worry. Chen Xing observed his appearance and could already speculate that there were 3 ways to make such living corpses. The first was to get by with ordinary people who had no real strength and had died amidst the war. It would seem that a magical artifact full of resentment, namely, this rattle drum, was able to turn the dead into animated living corpses. The second was to have a living person take the potion containing the devil god's blood. That way, they would be gradually transformed into animated living corpses while they were still alive. The third was what they had seen in Longzhong Mountain. That mysterious masked man, namely, Shiha's group, gathered resentment and injected them into the corpses of the Jin dynasty's 8 princes, directly bringing them back to life. These black-armored drought fiend princes seemed to be the strongest so far. "Really, you don't need to mind me," Chen Xing said honestly, "I know you like Sholo Kong. Also, I won't be together with him." "Rubbish!" Che Lufeng coldly said, "He's the great Chanyu. He'll marry and have children. You think he's going to marry a man?" "That's not what I meant," Chen Xing explained. "We're not in the kind of relationship you think we are in, but even if it was true, I still won't be together with him. After this period of time, in 2 or 3 years at the most, I have to go." Che Lufeng looked at Chen Xing skeptically. Chen Xing said, "Look, I'm dying. Why would I need to lie to you? And you see, Sholo Kong also doesn't think much about me." Che Lufeng said in a cold voice, "He thinks a lot about you, but you don't appreciate it. Who else can make him ride north alone in that kind of weather just to bring them back? Chen Xing, he's the great Chanyu. Whoever the person is, if any of your clansmen went missing, he certainly would." "Bullshit!" Che Lufeng rudely cut him off. "I've been his anda for 14 years, and also, you went north in the 11th lunar month, it was a suicidal act." The clan chiefs had begged him again and again to not go after that old bastard Akele. "But on that day when Sholo Kong found out you had left alone, he still, forget it." Chen Xing hadn't seriously thought about that time. Until today, he only knew that the Hus outside the Great Wall had a unique set of survival rules. One of them was that they were strictly forbidden to hunt outside the group in the cold season, nor were they allowed to go north alone during the cold winter, because this act was no different than suicide. In order to avoid their people getting into more accidents, the Hus wouldn't support those who rode alone outside Chi Chuan, and the rules also forbid rescue, so as to prevent more people from dying. They would rather let the people who refused to follow the rules die, becoming an example so those senseless people wouldn't follow their footsteps. Yet on that day, Xiang Shu himself broke the rule. "It's my turn," Chen Xing said. "How did Zhou Zhen come back to life? What did he say to you? What do they want to do outside the Great Wall?" "Him? As early as the day he died, he was granted a new life by Shi Haidaran," Che Lufeng said in a cold voice. "Many years ago, following the bloody battle between the Rurans and the Akales, under the mediation of the great Chanyu, Shulukong, the two sides ceased their fighting and vowed not to seek revenge at the price of convicting Yuduo and Zhou Zhen. Both weren't granted sky burials and had to be buried instead. A few months later, when Che Lufeng went to pay tribute to Zhou Zhen, he discovered traces suggesting that the grave had been touched by someone. After an excavation, he found that Zhou Zhen's corpse had disappeared. Just this winter, when he went to Karasha to hunt, he seemed to catch sight of Zhou Zhen's figure. After pursuing him all the way, a dark shadow that suddenly leaped up from the side of the road and in a flash, it cut open his stomach with sharp claws. Zhou Zhen appeared near Karasha? What was he doing? Chen Xing suddenly pondered this question. He always felt that there was something he still hadn't figured out. Some hidden matters containing important information were hidden inside a dense fog, and from the beginning until the end, he couldn't see the outline of them at all. When going north with King Akele, he must have overlooked something important. Che Lufeng looked at Chen Xing. Seeing that he was even more puzzled, Che Lufeng casually replied, "I'm just following their orders." "Why are you doing this?" Chen Xing said, "Does your enmity with the Akales run this deep? Even if it is, and you want to get your revenge, why should you bring it against the whole Chi Chuan, even committing crimes against your own people?" Che Lufeng shouted, "Shut up! You son of a bitch! What do you know about the feud between us?" Che Lufeng glared at Chen Xing, breathing deeply. He took a deep breath before saying, "The Rurans are the true master of Chi Chuan, Shulukong is just a coward. Fujian has already traversed the pass, and the Murong clan has also been subjugated. If we don't take advantage of the current situation and capture Guanzhong now, until when do we have to wait? You Han people have a saying, to view the sky from the bottom of a well." Che Lufeng was full of hatred. Shulukong only understands martial arts, but every day, he has to become the peacemaker of many useless matters. When clans were fighting over water and plants, he mediated. When people had nothing to eat, he helped them out. At heart, he has already become a weak and incapable coward. Is that so? Chen Xing murmured, "Therefore, you want to be the great Chanyu? Go south with the whole ancient Chi Chuan covenant, sharing a soup with Fujian? But have you ever sought your clansman's opinion?" When Fujian assumed the position of Emperor of the Central Plains, Che Lufeng questioned, "Did he ask the people's opinion?" "That's true." Chen Xing, who had always been a man who knew when to let go, laughed and said, "Compared to your immortal deeds, as well as your emperor's aptitude which transcends even rivers and mountains, these eyes of mine could only see an inch of light." Che Lufeng of course heard that Chen Xing was ridiculing him, but while the Rurans could show off their eloquence, they were still far from being an opponent to Chen Xing, this debate powerhouse. During the Jin dynasty, people put much importance on light intellectual conversation, and Chen Xing, ever since his childhood, was used to reading things such as "a white horse is not a horse." He really wanted to debate with Che Lufeng, and he was sure he could make him talk until he vomited blood, but since his purpose now wasn't to quarrel, he didn't talk about this and that with him. "Since the topic has come up, I have no objection with a Hu becoming the Emperor of the Central Plains." Chen Xing thought about it. "But, leaving aside whether they're Hus or not, can the dead still become an emperor?" Now that's quite strange. Che Lufeng. Along the way, Chen Xing could roughly guess she has plot. It seemed that he planned to resurrect Chu and establish a completely new world. However, this group of living people who had turned into living corpses, while they were not afraid of death, they would still eventually rot. How meaningful is it to make the divine land a place full of dead people? In the end, will there be anyone left? Ba? Che Lufeng breathed in and was about to retort, but his breath got stuck. He was unable to breathe out, and his complexion gradually changed. Wei. Chen Xing immediately said, "Don't be angry, calm down first, Che Lufeng." Xiang Shu had yet to come, but somehow Che Lufeng was already dying. He gradually collapsed, but Sima Wei didn't even spare him a glance, as if he was already accustomed to it. Che Lufeng. Chen Xing personally witnessed the process of Che Lufeng's transformation from a living person into a living corpse. He immediately got up and wanted to examine his body, dragging the iron chain with him. Sima Wei untied the chain and held it in his hands. He didn't stop him, allowing Chen Xing to get close to Che Lufeng. Che Lufeng, from the moment he started talking to Chen Xing, had always been taking deep breaths, and occasionally gasping for breath. At this moment, when Chen Xing tried to feel his breath, he discovered that it was growing weaker and weaker. Che Lufeng's eyes started to become cloudy. Chen Xing dragged his shackles, leaned on his body, and listened to his heartbeat. After that, he pressed on Che Lufeng's pulse. He picked up an arrowhead and used it to lightly pierce his skin before continuing to sniff the scent. Corpse venom. It was similar to the poison coming from the bite of living corpses, only it was fiercer. In just a few days, it had eroded his whole body and made him emanate the same scent as that of Liu Ying. It seemed that the scratch and the bite of the living corpses contained poison, and the original source of it was precisely the devil god's blood. The difference only lay in the speed of the toxins flaring up. Sima Wei pulled down the iron chain, meaning that he wanted to keep Chen Xing away from Che Lufeng. Che Lufeng's whole state wasn't right, he said in a trembling voice, I'm cold. It's so cold. Zhou Zhen. Are you there? Zhou Zhen. From far below the mountain came the sound of battle, as well as signal horns. Chen Xing quickly raised his head. He realized that Xiang Shu was leading people to climb the mountain to rescue him. Zhou Zhen must be busy dealing with Xiang Shu at this moment, and there was also the Dinghai prince, Sima Yu, blocking the way. Che Lufeng. Chen Xing looked at Che Lufeng and suddenly had a little sympathy for the enemy. It's so cold. Che Lufeng was at the end of his life. He couldn't perceive his surroundings anymore, and finally said what he really thought at the bottom of his heart. He did his best and stammered out, "Shulakong, save me. I don't want to die. I regret it." Chen Xing. Chen Xing was in a very complicated mood as he held Che Lufeng's hand. "That cup of wine," Che Lufeng said, "I didn't want to drink it at first. I was afraid." "Shulakong. Shulakong. I'm sorry." Che Lufeng's eyes gradually became cloudy, and 2 lines of tears dripped down from the corner of his eyes. Chen Xing suddenly understood. When Zhou Zhen reappeared in front of Che Lufeng, he must have made him drink the wine mixed with the potion containing the devil god's blood. At that time, Che Lufeng was impulsive. It was very likely he regretted it not long after drinking it. But he already had no chance of turning back. As a result, he fell deeper and deeper until the current events. For a moment, Chen Xing didn't know whether to save him or not. Che Lufeng slaughtered the whole Akele clan and was guilty of terrible crimes. But if not because of Zhou Zhen's coercion, it surely wouldn't have ended up this way. Thinking for a long while, Chen Xing eventually gave up. In any event, let's just do it. Ba. Save his life first. Dying like this is letting him off too easily. Che Lufeng is Xiang Shu's anda, so he has to be punished by him. At least take him back to Chi Le Chuan and make him apologize before killing him. This will protect your heart, if you still have one, Chen Xing said softly. He then ignited the heart lamp and pressed it on Che Lufeng's chest. All of a sudden, Sima Wei abruptly turned his head and looked at Chen Xing and Che Lufeng. Chen Xing closed his eyes, and his whole body was shrouded in blinding light. Pressing Che Lufeng's chest, it was just like that day in Karasha when he woke Xiang Shu up. Resentment has already wrapped around Che Lufeng's whole body, but Chen Xing's hands were forcibly injecting the heart lamp's power into Che Lufeng's heart. At that very moment, Che Lufeng shouted painfully. The power of heart lamp within his body fiercely struggled against the devil god's blood, frantically fighting for control over his life and death. The devil god's blood was dragging him into the dark abyss called death, while the heart lamp was like a sharp blade that tightly held onto both his yin and yang souls. Che Lufeng's life was constantly being pulled by these two forces, and his soul was almost torn to pieces. "Let me die ba!" Che Lufeng screamed. Chen Xing suddenly let go and withdrew the heart lamp's power. Sima Wei immediately strode towards Chen Xing, grabbing him by the collar and dragging him away from Che Lufeng. Che Lufeng kept rolling for a moment before stopping. He then lay on one side, motionless. Dead? Chen Xing thought, or will there be any changes later? He couldn't take his eyes off Che Lufeng, but then, Sima Wei suddenly spoke. "You interfered with the process of transforming him into a drought fiend." Sima Wei's voice wasn't as hoarse as Sima Yu's, and it was somewhat like a living person. "You sealed the last bit of his humanity in his heart." Chen Xing. Chen Xing suddenly raised his head and looked at Sima Wei. However, Sima Wei just tied the chain to the stone pillar and told him not to move around. "Chen Xing, Sima Wei, do you remember what happened when you were still alive?" Sima Wei made a small movement as if wanting to take off his helmet, but Che Lufeng began to twitch, and Sima Wei suddenly stopped. They looked at Che Lufeng, who slowly got up from the ground. His eyes were cloudy and expressionless as he stared at Chen Xing. "Sholokong! Sholokong!" Che Lufeng murmured. From the foot of the mountain, the sounds of people fighting and horses neighing were getting nearer. From behind him, an iron claw lightly scratched Chen Xing. Chen Xing almost turned his head, but managed to restrain his shock and retreated slowly. Wearing his dragon claws, Xiao Shan quietly climbed up the Yin Mountain's peak. Chen Xing retreated to the pillar and looked at Che Lufeng. Che Lufeng closely examined Chen Xing and muttered, "I want to kill you. Sholokong is mine, nobody can take him away." Che Lufeng's state of mind appeared to be disordered. Chen Xing didn't know whether this was because he had used the heart lamp just now, but Che Lufeng right now seemed to be very persistent. He clutched a dagger and was ready to attack and kill Chen Xing at any time. Sima Wei drew out his long sword and stood in front of Chen Xing. At the same time, the fighting sound at the foot of the mountain was getting even closer, as if there was another army in the Yin Mountain's gorge. Chen Xing just didn't know which side it came from, whether it was their side or the enemy's. He kept moving back until the edge of the platform, then flicked his finger. In an instant, from behind him, Xiao Shan became a phantom and whoosh, he flicked across. Sima Wei immediately turned around, aware of the enemy's approach. He abandoned Che Lufeng and rushed forward with his sword. However, when Xiao Shan's iron claws hit the chain, a ding resounded, but the iron chain didn't break. "Damn, this chain isn't ordinary." Xiao Shan quickly waved his claws again to break the chain, but it still didn't budge in the slightest. Sima Wei's sword was already in front of the two men. Chen Xing immediately pushed Xiao Shan away and shouted, "Run! You can't cut it. I go save him." Xiao Shan climbed up the stone pillar and shouted to Chen Xing, "I go save him." "Wait." Chen Xing immediately understood that Xiao Shan meant, "I've come to save you, don't worry." In front of him, Sima Wei promptly moved away his sword and flew to the pillar. Xiao Shan leaped away like a wolf and moved over to another pillar. He bared his teeth and growled at Sima Wei. "Leave me first!" Chen Xing shouted, Get Xiangshu up here! Quick! Sima Wei transformed into a black whirlwind. Xiao Shan had to backflip on the stone pillar and fly off the platform. Sima Wei chased after him and also flew off. As soon as Sima Wei, who was protecting Chen Xing, was drawn away, Lu Feng was out of control once again. He clutched his dagger and walked slowly towards Chen Xing, his eyes unfocused. Kill you, kill you! Chen Xing thought, why hasn't Xiangshu come yet? With all his might, he used the iron chain to hit the pillar and shouted, Xiangshu! Xiangshu! I'm here! In a moment of desperation, he activated the heart lamp. Xiangshu actually wasn't that far, but he was moving very slowly. Chen Xing sensed him. He was on a canyon less than 100 steps from here. Lu Feng was getting nearer to Chen Xing. Chen Xing yelled, Sholu Kong! If you don't come, I will be hacked to death by your enda. There was a roar coming from the canyon, shut up! When Lu Feng heard Xiangshu's voice reverberating in the canyon, he instantly went mad and pounced on Chen Xing uncontrollably, shouting, I'll kill you first! Chen Xing blocked using the iron chain, making a ding sound as he parried Lu Feng's dagger. After retreating once again, he was already at the edge of the cliff. When he was hit by Lu Feng, he immediately stepped into the air and shouted as he fell straight off the cliff. Xiangshu had already fought his way through the heart of the canyon. When he looked up, he saw Chen Xing's body fall from the summit of more than 20 zhang. In an instant, Xiangshu reeled as if he had received a heavy blow, but Chen Xing stopped in midair after only falling for a moment. Hands hurt so much Chen Xing shouted hard. The iron chains made him dangle and swung left and right on the cliff. Hold on! Xiangshu was so angry that he shouted, I'm coming! Chen Xing turned his head and was about to shout help me. When he suddenly froze. Zhou Zhen commanded the Ruran army of thousands of people and horses as they continuously encircled and sieged the canyon. Sima Yu stood on the top of Mountain Rock, watching the battle with a pitch-black magical artifact in his hand. The canyon was already covered with dead bodies, and the snow was all tainted with black blood. Yet, there was only one Xiangshu fighting madly in the canyon. That's right, one person. Chen Xing. Xiangshu was fully armored and armed with a broadsword. He charged all over the place on foot, and wherever he went, he swept away the enemy. There were tens of thousands of enemies, but none could get close to him. Xiangshu, you crazy ma! Chen Xing immediately changed what he wanted to say and quickly rambled, Xiangshu, go away! You quickly leave ah! You crazy ma! Why are you alone? Xiangshu, with blood all over his head and face, took off his helmet and threw it to the ground. He looked up at Chen Xing, who was swinging on the cliff, and shouted, take care of your head. Half of Lu Feng's body appeared on the cliff. He began to shoot arrows, and one managed to graze Chen Xing's face. Chen Xing had to swing around to avoid them. Xiao Shan had escaped Sima Wei's pursuit a long time ago. He rushed to the summit and waved his claws towards Lu Feng head-on. Lu Feng was immediately scratched in the chest and fell backwards. With a loud cry, Xiao Shan positioned his iron claws on the base of the stone pillar and used them to pry it up. Chen Xing grabbed the chain and climbed up. In a hurry, he vaguely realized that Xiangshu unexpectedly only rushed in with Xiao Shan to rescue himself. Where are the people of Qi Li Chuan? Where is everybody? Don't tell me something happened to them again ba! Xiangshu! Chen Xing turned his head as he climbed and shouted down the cliff, Don Turi! I can protect myself. You can't beat them all, just run. Don't show off. End chapter. Dinghai Fusheng Records. Chapter 44. Lone Fight. This battle could easily be called the pinnacle of Xiangshu's life. One lone man challenging 60,000 men, it was comparable to that unbeatable martial god who had charged alone 7 times through the enemy's ranks in the ancient battlefield of Dangyang nearly 200 years ago. No matter how many he had killed, the Ruran cavalry just kept coming, and Xiang Shu, who had been fighting alone, was losing his strength. When he heard Chen Xing's words, "You can't beat them all, just run," it was like there was a mouthful of blood inside his chest. Contrary to the words' original intention, they instead stirred up the blood all over his body. He wasn't afraid of death and once again went all out at the bottom of the cliff. Chen Xing climbed up with both his hands and feet, and from below, he could see Xiao Shan trying to pry up the stone pillar. His whole person jumped up and down on his claws, and he was using all his strength to step on them. But then, Che Lufeng picked up his blade and aimed it straight towards Chen Xing, who was still climbing. Chen Xing dared not shout, fearing it would distract Xiang Shu, so he had no choice but to grit his teeth and swing on the cliff. Che Lufeng was fuming with rage. "Han dog, the time of your death." Then the stone pillar on the platform fell over and smashed into Che Lufeng's waist. Before Chen Xing could clearly see what had happened, he felt something flash before his eyes. He saw Che Lufeng with open arms and a stone pillar following behind him directly fly towards him. Che Lufeng's face looked ferocious as he fell past Chen Xing. "Chen Xing!" Chen Xing immediately looked up and shouted, "Xiao!" He had yet to finish when the thousands of Jin stone pillar dragged the iron chain down with it, and whoosh! Chen Xing also got pulled down and flew straight to the bottom of the cliff. Chen Xing felt the sudden pull must have distorted his facial expression. "Chen Xing, Xiang Shu's right hand was trembling from exhaustion, so he switched the sword to his left. When he was about to urge his horse to go up the mountain, he saw a stone pillar rolling down from behind the Ruran army. It made the ground tremble as it dragged the chained Chen Xing down the cliff. "Beware of falling stones!" Chen Xing, who was dragged by the chain like a kite drifting in the wind, shouted from a distance. Zhou Zhen, who was commanding the army, suddenly turned his head only to see a massive stone rolling down and crushing nearly 10,000 Ruran cavalry. This turn of events wasn't good at all, so he quickly dodged away to avoid that huge pillar that was falling from the top of the mountain. Xiao Shan had immediately gone after it, and Sima Wei, with black armor covering his whole body, rushed down from the top to chase after him. Desperate, Sima Wei detached and threw his black shield. It spun as it flew over, aligning perfectly with Chen Xing's feet. Chen Xing's tongue almost flew out in the wind. With the pillar still dragging him downhill, he stepped on the shield and began to ski down, slide to the left, avoid to the right, all while still handcuffed. The pillar crushed anything it ran into, and there wasn't enough time for the Ruran cavalry to dodge it. Just like a rolling pin, the pillar flattened both riders and horses into meat pancakes. Xiang Shu. Chen Xing felt dizzy for a moment and kept changing directions while Xiao Shan kept trying to throw himself on him several times. Luckily, not only did he not fall, he even managed to stabilize himself. Preoccupied with dodging, Zhou Zhen unexpectedly had forgotten for a moment that Xiang Shu was still right there. Panicking, he rushed into the canyon. Xiang Shu once again flipped over to get on his horse and chased after Zhou Zhen. Zhou Zhen changed his horse's direction and came face to face with Xiang Shu. "Heart lamp!" Xiang Shu roared. Chen Xing was dazed from all the dragging, and he kept seeing stars in front of his eyes. When he heard Xiang Shu's shout, he instinctively started the heart lamp. The heart lamp's brilliant light flashed inside the dark canyon. Xiang Shu lifted up his broadsword and pointed towards the horizon. From it, white light burst out and swept across the surroundings. The blade of the sword shone bright, each character of the 9 syllables of Tao appearing on it in succession. Zhou Zhen's eyes opened wide. When he was met with Xiang Shu's sword glare, he raised his hand to block out the light. "Go back to wherever you came from," Xiang Shu's voice sounded in his ear. Then, the sword split him down. Amidst his loud scream, Zhou Zhen suddenly burst into glimmering dust before scattering in all directions. Meanwhile, the stone pillar dragging Chen Xing rolled into the forest before crashing into a big boulder. It immediately shattered into almost 10 pieces. Along the way, whenever Chen Xing wasn't being obstructed by branches, he was sliding in the snow. He had almost fallen to the side but managed to step on the shield again and avoid danger, unexpectedly stopping without the slightest injury. Then, he kicked the shield up and caught it with his hands. His hands were still bound by the iron chain and now he was tied to a huge stone pillar's remains that still weighed around 60 or 70 jin. His whole face turned pale, and he gasped for breath. When Xiang Shu eventually caught up with Chen Xing, he suddenly grabbed his hands. He was covered with black blood from head to toe. They both didn't say anything. You. Chen Xing looked at Xiang Shu and didn't know what to say. Me what? Xiang Shu grabbed Chen Xing's wrist and wouldn't let go, unconsciously hurting him a little. Looking around, he could only see chaos everywhere. Most of the Ruran cavalry had been taken care of by Chen Xing's Iepitor and was now regrouping in a panicked rush. He quickly said, "Now is not the time to talk, let's go." Chen Xing, Xiao Shan. Xiang Shu, he can protect himself. Chen Xing also thought that Xiao Shan's speed was indeed very fast. Since Sima Wei couldn't catch him, Xiao Shan should be able to protect his own life without much trouble. Now, the most important thing was that he couldn't fall into the enemy's hands and become a hostage again, or else it would only put Xiao Shan and Xiang Shu at more of a disadvantage. Chen Xing ran until he was out of breath. In the depths of the woods, a cave appeared. Ah! Chen Xing was about to say nice. When Xiang Shu pressed his head down and motioned him not to speak. The two of them went in. The cave was pitch black, and it was covered with frost. Chen Xing lit up a small area with the heart lamp. "Why is it just the two of you?" Chen Xing asked. "Xiang Shu, I didn't let Xiao Shan come. He followed me. Am I alone not enough to save you?" Xiang Shu was practically furious with Xiao Shan. Back then, he had been ready to rescue Chen Xing, but Xiao Shan kept following him around. So, Xiang Shu had to change his plans. He challenged the enemy head-on to distract their attention while Xiao Shan climbed up the peak to quietly rescue Chen Xing. The end result, Xiao Shan went wild, and made such a big mess in the end. "How about Karakoram?" Chen Xing asked. "It's guarded." Xiang Shu walked ahead, one hand carrying the boulder and pulling the chain along. He vigilantly looked around, watching for an ambush. Chen Xing finally calmed down. He frowned and said, "You're taking too much risk. You came here alone." "Xiang Shu, I don't want my people to risk or even lose their lives just because they followed me to save you. You have a problem with that." Chen Xing felt a little guilty when he heard this, and he didn't know why, but he felt very stuffy when he looked at Xiang Shu. "If I hadn't helped defend the city for you people to begin with, would I have been caught?" But this was merely a passing thought. Looking at Xiang Shu's armor that was covered with black blood and his disheveled hair, he looked more like a ghost who had crawled straight out of the underworld. It made Chen Xing slightly uncomfortable. He had wanted to reply with, "Then why did you still come?" but he faintly picked out something else from Xiang Shu's words. The feeling was the same as when one plucked out a string, it gave out a barely audible, hard to discern vibrato. He wanted to listen attentively, only to discover that the Gukan sound had long been gone and what remained was just the echo feeling similar to the feeling that appeared when one was tasting an illusion of reciprocated love. They both went silent again for a moment. "Are you feeling better?" Xiang Shu asked harshly. "What?" Chen Xing was at a loss. "I've always been fine." "Bullshit." Xiang Shu turned around and said angrily, "You were vomiting blood." Chen Xing then realized that Xiang Shu was talking about the time when he had fainted because he had exhausted his heart's power for the heart lamp. He felt as if he had been slapped hard, so he hurriedly said, "It's nothing." It was just because back then, I had overused the heart lamp's power, it made me unable to breathe for a while. Let's just go or you're going to hit me now. Xiang Shu carried the boulder and dragged down the chain. The two walked towards the windy part of the cave, and in less than a quarter of an hour, they saw a light. They had unexpectedly entered a spacious ravine in the heart of Yin Mountains. This ravine had weapons and armor scattered everywhere. Chen Xing murmured, "Where is this?" "The Sinner's Pit." Xiang Shu looked around. He saw that the ravine was in the shape of a half-moon, it was surrounded by several peaks, and in the distance, there was a dense forest covered in snow. He said, "Inside the Chi-Le covenant, people who have committed a crime are not granted sky burials and must be buried instead. This is where they are all buried." Chen Xing looked towards the sky. The sky was so overcast that he couldn't even tell the difference between east, west, south, and north. How could they leave the mountain? While he was pondering that over, the sound of a stone falling to the ground suddenly came from the side. Xiang Shu supported himself with his sword as he slightly gasped for breath. It was clear that the battle had taken a toll on him, and he couldn't walk anymore. Chen Xing hurriedly made Xiang Shu sit down and undid his armor. There were blood stains inside and out, and even the garment inside the leather armor had been soaked purple and black by blood. "How many did you defeat?" Chen Xing recalled that astonishing scene. "I don't know." Xiang Shu leaned against a big tree with his eyes closed as he replied coldly, "No time to count. Help me take off my armor." Xiang Shu wore a tile-heavy armor. Not long after he had entered the canyon, the warhorse was shot by an arrow and it couldn't hold on. This armor was made of hardened steel by the Teals and the Ruren's craftsmen. It was deformed from all the arrows and swords, but it had still protected his body well. Chen Xing bared Xiang Shu's chest. Xiang Shu took a deep breath and gasped for more air. "Have a rest." Xiang Shu sat under the tree and with his back against it, he closed his eyes, then said, "Guowang is too tired, too tired." Chen Xing was still chained, and with much difficulty, he tore off his robe to cover Xiang Shu's upper body. Looking at Xiang Shu's tired and blood-stained face, he thought that he was still so handsome. He couldn't help but want to reach out and touch Xiang Shu's face. At that moment, his mind gave birth to an idea, seemingly urging him to do something to express his gratitude towards Xiang Shu. "How far is it from Karakoram to here?" Chen Xing said. "1 day and 1 night, Xiang Shu replied. Chen Xing thought, "Did you come to save me as soon as I was caught? You want something to eat, ma?" Chen Xing asked once again, "Are you hungry?" "Eat what?" Xiang Shu indifferently said, "Can you even find me something to eat?" "Eat you? How many liangs of meat do you think you have?" Chen Xing had to drop the subject. Xiang Shu's breathing stabilized, and he no longer talked, clearly asleep. Chen Xing sat down on his side, slightly leaned against him. His surroundings were quiet, the only sound he could hear was the rustling of the wind passing through the mountains and forests. At that moment, it was as if all dangers had distanced themselves away from them, and in the whole world, there was only this peaceful snow and lofty mountains. "I'm sorry," Chen Xing said in his heart. "If I hadn't one-sidedly made you my protector, I wouldn't have caused you so much trouble, ba." Chen Xing sighed in his heart, but regarding this matter, he was very confused. Now and then, Chen Xing went as far as treating Xiang Shu as his last hope, because when he had been kidnapped, Xiang Shu had fought hard and risked his life for him. Chen Xing was only leaning slightly on him, but Xiang Shu, eyes still closed, raised an arm and draped it around Chen Xing's shoulders, pulling him a little closer to himself. This action seemed to fill Chen Xing with endless courage, his momentary frustration vanishing like smoke in thin air. Chen Xing slowly leaned down. Resting his head on Xiang Shu's body, he looked at the desolate graves in front of him. "What?" Xiang Shu said suddenly. "What?" Chen Xing asked blankly. "Heart lamp," Xiang Shu said concisely. Chen Xing said, Heart lamp? But I'm not using it. Xiang Shu opened his eyes and doubtfully said, I feel it. It's like you're glowing all over me. Chen Xing raised his head, but Xiang Shu pressed it down so that his head still laid on his body. Leaning on him, Chen Xing felt better, but he couldn't tell why. Did you see Che Lufeng? Xiang Shu changed the subject and asked. Chen Xing gave a rough outline of the events. Xiang Shu frowned and said, Zhou Zhen became a living corpse shortly after his death and so did Yu Duo. Where have they been hiding all these years? This was also the point that Chen Xing was puzzled over the most. If the world's spiritual qi was still there, they might have been able to ask the Yaos who could be found everywhere in the mountains or other areas. What are you going to do with Che Lufeng? Chen Xing asked. I'm going to take him back, Xiang Shu said in a low voice, or finish him here. It's my fault. Chen Xing had originally wanted to say that you shouldn't hand over the responsibility of guarding Qi Le Chuan to Che Lufeng, but what was the use of saying that now? Besides, thinking about the circumstances at that time, even if Xiang Shu hadn't handed over the responsibility to his anda, if Che Lufeng were to take over Qi Le Chuan and kill people anyway, there still would have been no one who could subdue him. Xiang Shu's decision to leave Qi Le Chuan was a mistake, and this mistake was caused by Chen Xing himself. Before I left, he promised me, Xiang Shu murmured, that he wouldn't take revenge on the Akales and that he would protect Qi Le Chuan for me. That night, surrounded by the clan chiefs, the two of us came to an agreement. Chen Xing suddenly recalled the night when King Akale had waited outside his tent and offered to take him north. King Akale must have also felt that the argument between Xiang Shu and Che Lufeng was endless. He didn't want to drag the whole Qi Le Chuan into danger because of himself, and also didn't want the great Chanyu to abandon the whole Qi Le Chuan for the sake of the Akales, so he left without permission in the middle of the argument and came to assist Chen Xing on his own. Che Lufeng isn't that kind of person. Some words were said just because he let his emotions take over him in the heat of the moment. Once he calms down, he'll eventually get the big picture. It's Zhou Zhen and Shi Hai. Xiang Shu murmured, it was the medicine Shi Hai gave him that changed his temperament. Forget it, Chen Xing said, feeling a little uncomfortable. Xiang Shu said, can you save him again? Chen Xing replied, it's hard to say. If the spiritual qi of heaven and earth were still there, I could have attempted to dispel the influence of the devil god's blood. Xiang Shu, it's impossible for him to be forgiven. I just want him to regain his dignity and then die. For what crime? A hoarse voice said, Shulukong, the one who should ask for forgiveness is you. Chen Xing suddenly looked up. Xiang Shu, however, seemed to have known that Che Lufeng was coming. He casually patted Chen Xing, indicating for him to get up, before standing up himself, using his sword for support. Drop it, explain yourself. Che Lufeng had been pummeled beyond recognition. When he fell off the cliff, his head was knocked until it became dented, the armor and clothes on his whole body had shredded into rags, and one of his hands was broken and hung free at his side. Che Lufeng's eyes were opened wide, looking at Xiang Shu. My anda, you should remember the consequence of going back on your words. Don't move a jong away from this tree. Xiang Shu picked up his sword and slowly walked away from Chen Xing. His upper body was bare, showing the scar left behind from that time in Chang'an not too long ago where he had blocked an arrow for Chen Xing. His lower body was still covered with iron armor. He held the sword horizontally, blocking Che Lufeng's way. There was a small noise coming in from all directions. A powerful resentment was spreading quietly in this ancient burial ground. Sima Yu appeared from inside the forest. Holding an antler staff, he stood on high ground, overlooking the three men in the graveyard. Chen Xing raised his head to look at Sima Yu, noticing that the antler staff was commanding the resentment around it. After a while, it grew by leaps and bounds, and all of the resentment beyond the Great Wall rushed into the graveyard, pouring into the ravine like running water. Sima Yu. Chen Xing said in a deep voice, "Let your master come out and speak." Exorcist, Sima Yu, standing above them, said in an aloof and cold voice. "You will see him soon enough. I'll give you a chance, give up all resistance and come with me. That way, you'll naturally have an opportunity to ask him everything." At that moment, Chen Xing had an idea: if I pretended to lose and be caught, what would happen? It was obvious that these two resurrected living corpses who were called Drought Fiend Kings had received an order from their superior to capture him alive. But Chen Xing immediately gave up on that idea. Shi Hai wanted to see him, so they would keep him alive, but the same couldn't be said for Xiang Shu. It was too risky to try, and it really wasn't worth it. I have no interest in negotiating with him. Chen Xing lifted his chain and confronted the enemy on the high ground. Showing no emotions, not even the slightest hint of fear, he said, "Go back and tell him, my mission is to annihilate him and send him back to Samsara, to the place where the dead ought to go." Sima Yu burst out into a hoarse, frantic laugh. "You alone? I'd like to see, with the silence of all magic, what a weak and defenseless exorcist can do." The moment his voice fell, Sima Yu thrusted the staff in his hand into the ground, and the overflowing resentment snapped into a frenzy. Cold winds howled in the ancient graveyard, as if their surroundings had transformed into the underworld. When he saw this, Chen Xing muttered, "Not good." Like the yin-yang mirror and the zhang drum, this magical artifact had been refined with resentment. The resentment in the magical artifact, coupled with that caused by the war and the massacre in Qi Le Chuan, had begun to stir the earth vein of this gloomy place. This situation was even more dangerous than Chang'an City. At first, he didn't think much about it as there weren't many people living in Qi Le Chuan, and there had been no large-scale war for so many years. So, even if there were resentment hovering around, it would dissipate very quickly. However, what he didn't expect was that what Qi Le Chuan lacked the most if compared to Chang'an City was the most important factor: people. The fewer the number of living people, the weaker the Yang Qi would become, which slowed down the neutralization of the resentment born by death. Sima Yu had brought this magical artifact containing powerful resentment out of nowhere and was now forcibly urging and releasing its power. In an instant, dark clouds surged in the sky above, blood-red lightning also faintly visible. Numerous shadows appeared from within the mountain range, surrounding that tall and ancient tree in the graveyard. "Shulukong!" Che Lufeng roared from inside the dark clouds. "I've given you almost everything I have, and all these years, I've never owed you anything." Che Lufeng slowly emerged from the dense resentment. Chen Xing looked around the graveyard and found that countless animals had become corrupted deer, wolves, wild dogs, foxes, vultures. A horde of dead animals with exposed, eerie white bones and muddy eyes stared at them as they limped towards the graveyard. "My Enda is already dead," Xiang Shu said, holding his broadsword. "The monster standing in front of me is nobody." Chen Xing forced himself to calm down. He could see that Che Lufeng's broken and torn body was, to his surprise, being slowly mended inside the dense resentment. Looking up at the darkened sky, he then activated the heart lamp. This thick aura was interfering with the light of Xiang Shu's sword, dimming it down. The resentment was so heavy it gnawed away the power of heart lamp by the minute. "Shulukong," Che Lufeng said, trembling. "You selfish, ungrateful, vile man! I've seen through you, just die. Return everything I've given you." Chen Xing shouted, "Xiang Shu! Don't get too far away from me. The heart lamp's mana has been weakened." Chen Xing rushed into the battlefield, and Xiang Shu moved back. Incomparable resentment was enveloping Che Lufeng. He was even more unreconciled than Feng Tian. He revealed a bone whip from his left hand and pounced on Xiang Shu. End chapter.